Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Hello, friends. I'm so excited to have Josh Hall on the podcast with me today. Josh is a fellow web designer turned educator, and this conversation with him is so good. I don't want to introduce it too long because I just want to play the interview for you guys. But before I do that, a little bit about Josh. If you're a web designer, you may have already heard of him. He's an educator in our space between his courses, his YouTube channel, and his podcast. But a little backstory, Josh built his WordPress web design business to 6 figures a year as a solopreneur, and his journey into web design is super interesting. I'm going to let you just wait and hear him share that as I ask him questions about it. He scaled his web design agency up before selling it in the summer of 2020 to focus on full-time teaching others how to build web design businesses of their own. And now he's an educator through and through, which we talk about this aspect too of his business, of how he pivoted from one-on-one work and an agency model into being an educator. So Josh and I jump all over the place in this interview, from his business story to his top tips for scaling your web design business to maintenance plans, messaging as designers, time management, fatherhood, so many other things. So whether you're a website designer like myself and Josh, or you do something else entirely in your business, I will just say there's definitely something for you here if you love hearing the business journey, the story behind the really successful entrepreneur. So real quick though, some quick highlights from our episode. So we talk about how to do maintenance plans as a designer, which was so fascinating to me. I absolutely loved that part. And I tried to ask Josh really good questions so that you guys can directly apply what he's teaching there. We talk about how Josh made over $100K a year as a solopreneur and some top tips for doing that. We talk about advice from working at home as a parent, which we get to at the very end of the episode, selling an agency and what that looked like. So Josh ultimately sold his web design agency, and he shares a lot of details about what that process was like, what selling it actually means, so much more there. We also talk about teams as a designer and working with contractors and delegating, all that kind of good stuff. And lastly, one thing I really enjoyed in this conversation was Josh and I talk about how having your business as your side hustle could actually be a benefit. So there's a lot more to the conversation than that, but those were a few things that really stuck out to me. Josh and I had so much fun together chatting, and I think we say this on the interview, I can't remember, but we actually did back-to-back interviews for both of our podcasts. We sat down in front of our computers for about 3 hours straight, and I interviewed him, and then he interviewed me. So altogether, it was again 3 hours of talking. It was really, really fun. And I will link to my interview on his show once that airs, so you guys can go give that a listen as well. But without further ado, here is my conversation with Josh Hall. All right, website designer friends, I have a treat for you today. I have the talented Josh Hall here to chat. And Josh is a fellow website designer, an educator for our website design industry, and he's a podcaster, an agency founder, and we both have Central Perk stuff with us here, which is kind of funny. So it'll be great. So welcome, Josh, to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Elizabeth. I was so excited to get to meet you officially. I feel like I've seen your brand around. I think you had mentioned you'd seen me around too. So to be able to actually connect and chat and to be on your show, what an honor. I'm really excited to talk shop. And I feel like we're very alike in our mindset with web design and online entrepreneurship. So yeah, I'm super excited to chat with you.
Yeah, I agree. And yes, it has been a long time coming. And I know for listeners, even So I think so many people listening right now are familiar with your stuff of senior tutorials, maybe listen to your podcast as well, which is an awesome show. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into your journey. And we were just saying like, we had a different topic, but we were like, let's switch to like the journey. Cause you were saying that you're excited to like have that on your mind right now as you're doing more in your business. So to start though, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, share a little bit about who you are and who you help in your business.
And that's one reason I love web design is everyone has a cool journey. There's no like exact path into it. I don't know anybody who really went to like a 4-year degree to go to web design school and then started their business. Everyone comes into web design as a musician or from a different industry, whatever it is. Like there's always cool paths into it. So yeah, now I am an online course creator and I teach people how to build their dream web design business. So I host the Web Design Business Podcast. That's really my focus now. But before I started my personal brand to teach website design, I was actually a web designer. So I was a web designer and a solopreneur for a decade before I eventually started teaching and went full time with this. So yeah, to really back up as a web designer, like I said, I didn't have a typical path like most web designers. I actually was a cabinet maker for a tour bus customizing shop. And I was building, random building cabinets. And I was also a drummer in a rock band at that time. So I was kind of a weekend warrior in a rock band traveling all over. And then I was always interested in art and I was always interested in design. And we were playing a festival and I had started doing artwork for my band. And a guy asked me one time, how much would you charge to design our t-shirt stuff? And I was like, wow, light bulb moment for me that said, I can make money at something I actually enjoy doing and I don't dread doing like I did with my cabinet job, unfortunately. That's how I got into the design world. And then I eventually was doing graphic designs for bands. And then I eventually got into websites and started a business around it.
That's cool. And with the cabinet making, do you feel like you use that skill as a designer of like maybe even like the having to pay attention to math and like measuring? Like, do you feel like that, like how did any of that or even the artistic side of it play in when you started your business as a designer?
I love that question because it backs up another point that I like to stress all the time. And that is your background, even if it's unrelated, will help you in so many ways in business as a web designer and an online entrepreneur. So yeah, 100%, Elizabeth, my cabinet making job, you would never think that would translate to building websites, but it 100% did because I had to learn that if I built a cabinet and the wall was like this, a millimeter off, something's going to be crooked or something's going to be wrong. And I'm going to hear it from all the guys who are working with me. In the case of web design, you'd hear it from the client or something would just look off. So yeah, it really helped me become actually in a weird way, like pixel related because I was used to looking at a measuring tape. And I think for anyone who designs websites for a while, you probably start to look at websites and see the pixels and you see the padding and the coding behind it often. Even if you're not a coder, you'll start seeing websites differently. So yeah, it helped me in a lot of ways. It was completely unrelated, but it helped me in my journey in becoming a strong web designer when I was just building websites and eventually starting a business. Yeah.
Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. option. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravy.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravy.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. Yeah. So when you started the business, what were all your services? Like, what were you offering? Did you actually immediately, because I know for listeners, you are in like WordPress is what you've worked with most, which I'm different in that way. We were just saying that before we started recording of like, we're both like, we don't know as much about the other person's software of choice, but like, what were you doing when you first started with like in terms of services for your clients?
Oh, so I laugh at this every time because I did everything and anything. In fact, if anyone wants a fun ride, you can go to I actually have my first business card. The design on my website is joshhall.co/business card. It'll take you to the JPEG of it. I was doing MySpace pages because I was in the band world. And I should say too, the design looks real gritty and real grungy. I mean, this was 2009, 10 maybe when I designed that. MySpace pages. I was actually, before WordPress, I learned to build websites on Dreamweaver. So I was doing pure code, which was awful and I hated it. And I was doing like Dreamweaver HTML sites. But then I was also, because I was doing graphic design, I did any graphic design service you can imagine. It was business cards, brochures, flyers, door hangers, t-shirts, whatever it was. And then because I didn't understand business, when I created my first business card, I was also doing drum lessons on the side because I was in the band world. So that's on my business card as well. Version 1, websites, graphic design, and drum lessons. I love to share that example because I had no idea what I was doing. I just put everything on this business card. And once I started getting real clients, I remember I was meeting at a Starbucks with this construction company that was pretty legit. It was one of my first real clients. And they were like, why do you have drum lessons on here, Josh? That seems so weird. And it just dawned on me like, wow, I didn't even think about that. It's so unrelated. To me, it was all related because I was in the band world. But yeah, I learned to kind of hone in on my services. And then eventually, years later, I ended up phasing out graphic design and just focused on websites and web design.
Yeah, I love it. Our stories are so similar. As you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, like I can relate to so much of that. I'm sure other listeners can as well. One question, what kind of music? Like what, I know you said rock, but like what were some of your favorite music? I know it's so random. I'm just curious now.
It was pretty heavy. It was pretty heavy rock. So we were like a Christian rock metal band. So where are you based out of again?
Nashville.
Yeah. So I think we probably played some shows around there. Yeah, it was heavy. It was heavy stuff.
That's funny. So for me, I feel like, and people have listened to my podcast a while, have heard me talk about this, but I got into the idea of design more as like a middle schooler on MySpace of like, I was making MySpace layouts. I had a MySpace layout shop where they were all free for other teenagers to do the little coding of their banners and the coloring and all of that. So I feel like MySpace, you talking about that really takes me back there. And same with Dreamweaver. That's what I had to learn in college to use. And I hated it so much.
It sounds really familiar for anyone who was getting into any sort of online world back then. A lot of web designers started with MySpace and some of these social media platforms where you could get into the code and tinker. And then, I mean, successful web designers that I've seen, the best ones just tinker and just figure stuff out. That's what really I feel like makes a good web designer.
Yeah, so true of just getting into the software and playing around with it. You did so many random stuff. And I think, again, like I said, I can relate to that. I think a lot of people listening can relate to that because it's like, hey, I have all these different interests. Maybe some of them are design and some of them are like, I can also have this talent of, like you said, like teaching drum lessons. First question. Do you regret it all? Or do you think it was a mistake that you didn't niche down sooner to just website design?
If I niched down sooner, I would have made a lot more money faster for sure. However, I don't know if I would say I would regret it totally because it taught me a lot about the value of that. And I think now as an online educator, I can warn people about doing that and how costly that can be in the long run. But I will say, like, I think it's really common. And I think most people do start out with, you just do everything that you're interested in, and then you'll find out what you're good at and what you want to pursue. And then eventually what you want to drop. So my top 3 services, I guess we could say for version 1 of my business was website design, graphic design, and drum lessons. Guess which one of those I cut out first because they were unrelated? For sure, drum lessons. But my graphic design services actually helped me build my web design side of things because I would do business cards for a company. And then they'd be like, oh, you do websites? Yeah, we need a website help. And then like I had a lot of brochure jobs that led into really good website jobs. So I definitely don't feel like that, hurt me long term. It definitely, I would have phased more graphic design out sooner, but it opened the door to a lot of website opportunities. But then I quickly realized this was like a vivid moment for me when I was working on a $250 business card and I had like 5 or so websites that were all $3,000 to $5,000 that I couldn't work on yet, because I was working on this $200 business card. And I realized, okay, now I'm at a point where this needs to be my focus. And there's a quote I heard a while back that has stuck with me ever since. And that is, what got me here won't get me there. And that really came to life for me with the graphic design services, because they helped me. They opened a lot of doors to get me to the place where I was building websites full time. Then I realized this is the moneymaker. This is what I'm good at now, what I really enjoy doing. This is what I want to really go forward with. So I started to kind of phase out my graphic design services and go right into web design is what I promote and do mostly.
Yeah, I love that. And it is like, by not niching down to just websites too soon, because you could have ended up being like, I want to start a drum lesson company. Like, you never know. So it's like, you have to like maybe give it a shot when you do have a variety of interests there. And I'm the same way. I did social media management was my like version of that. And it led to design clients.
And that's really common, particularly if there's any form of digital marketing. I think that's really common. A lot of social media designers and any type of social media advertising marketers tend to come into web design because websites were always a part of it. Like you're probably sending a lot of traffic to the client's websites via social. So naturally, it's like a natural progression, I feel like. But that's what's cool about the online world is you can choose what you want to do. Like I have a student right now who does websites sometimes, but actually does more social media. He's a rarity for most of my audience, but that's what he enjoys doing. So I'm like, by all means, if you love it and you're great at that, plus you're like my referral guy for that. So it's really cool. Yeah,
I love that. Oh, gosh. Okay. So I feel like I could go so many different directions with you on all this. I want to know though, because I think for people listening, especially who are new designers, do you remember how you got your first paying client? Or even just some of the first early ones, like any thoughts on like getting first clients and what that was like for you? Yeah,
the first clients were my personal network that already existed. Since I was in the band, it started off as like I mentioned, t-shirt designs and stuff like that. When it came to like actual business stuff, I just let everyone that knew me in the band world and the church I was a part of and my family and friends know that, hey, I'm doing websites now. So if you need websites, let me know. And I still get referrals this day for people who probably remember those first few posts. It's the easiest place to start. I know so many people are curious about how to start getting clients. The easiest way to go about it at first is to start with who you already know, because it's not necessarily who you know may be your client, more than likely not. What is more impactful is who they know. So if you put a post out on Instagram or Facebook or whatever saying you do websites now, maybe some of your friends and family will be interested. They're probably not going to be your best clients, so you don't want them anyway, likely. But they may know like 100 other people in their professional networks that need web design. And then when they say, hey, does anyone know a web designer? Oh, yeah, Josh or Elizabeth says she does web design now. Hit her up. That's how it all started for me. And then it just spiraled after that. It was referral based. Eventually, I got into a networking group, which was like a business to business kind of group where we exchanged referrals. That's when my business really took off. One of my actual first paying clients, the one I mentioned, who told me about the business card, this construction company, that was actually from Craigslist. It was my first ever experience trying out an ad. I did this Craigslist ad. I got like 9 out of 10 junk messages, but one was this company who was actually legit. They were looking for, they were a new company. They couldn't afford a bunch of other agencies in town, but they liked me. And I ended up doing brochures for them that eventually their website. And then I worked with them for years after that. So,
I heard you talking about that on your podcast, the Craigslist ad what did it say? What did you say it said again?
So I did a couple different versions.
Okay.
I did learn a mistake early on because I also at that time did a newspaper ad, which didn't do anything. Shocker. But I put cheap web design. Yeah. And lesson number 1 for anyone just starting out, if you put cheap in your messaging, guess what kind of clients you're going to get?
Yeah.
Very cheap clients. So I eventually moved to like affordable and cost-effective solutions, which I don't recommend doing at all. But if you are going to do that, don't do it for long, because eventually you want to get to the point where you can have premium prices that are going to keep you in business and attract good clients. So I learned messaging pretty early on too, on how important it is, like how you put yourself out there. That's who you're going to attract. So that's really, really important early on, I found.
Yeah, I definitely learned that early on as well. Of like even down to like the places you're finding your clients, but even beyond that, like you could be, sometimes you'll think of Upwork and some of those sites as like lower clients, but you could be on those sites, and the way you're talking about it is like what really makes a difference in the kind of clients you're attracting.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter where you are. It is how you talk about your services and how you present yourself. It's the same thing in a networking group. With my group of 20 some people, if I'm like, I'm Josh and I do cheap websites, they're going to, like, the people who are just starting, who have no budget, I'm going to attract them. But if I'm like, Josh, I build websites that help convert and grow your business, that's going to attract a whole nother serious business person. They're going to be much more willing to invest 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15,000 plus for websites if it grows their business. So I also learned unintentionally early on that if you start talking about results as quickly as you can in your messaging, like what a website will do for your clients, you will land so many more clients than you would have if you just say, I'm Elizabeth and I build websites. Because you're kind of viewed as a commodity if you just say, I build nice, pretty websites. But if you say, my websites are built to help you convert traffic into visitors and customers, and you help grow their business, that's what helps clients understand that a website is much more than just a pretty online brochure.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I talk about that all the time. Of like, if we sometimes as designers can forget that other people don't realize how much a website can help them. And some business owners think they don't need one at all, or that it's just a box to check in case someone, needs their phone number or whatever it is, some like super random, simple thing like that. But it's like, we forget how much we need to talk about the results because it's all in our head and we have to communicate that.
Yeah. And I should say these lessons that I kind of just went over quickly, those took years to learn. I mean, I unfortunately did not invest in any courses or trainings that helped me kind of learn those mindsets. I was really just getting into books even when I started my business officially and really became a business owner. A lot of business books helped me shape, my mindset as a business owner. And then I just kind of fumbled my way into a business that eventually I was like, holy crap, I'm about to hit 6 figures and this is legit now. So I was almost like forced to take it seriously and forced to hone in my services and really get serious about what I enjoyed doing and what I was best at. And I could really help clients with. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, of getting to 6 figures as a designer. When you had your agency, was it, okay, first of all, this might be a stupid question, but was it just you or did you have a team of designers? Like, what did that look like building that side to 6 figures?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did scale on a very small level. I never considered myself a quote unquote agency. I think that actually helped because a lot of my clients had been burned by typical digital agencies. Yeah. And I always just came across it as a small team. Now, when I started, it was 100% just me. And then eventually I had some friends who also did graphic design and stuff, and they would help. I would get occasional subcontract work if there was something that I was just completely stuck on or above my head. But it was primarily me until I really started getting serious as a business owner and realizing, and this kind of goes back to a quote I read recently in a book called Free Time by the author Jenny Blake, which is a really good book I recommend. Put out this quote that hit me like a brick. And that was, there's no reward for wearing all the hats in your business other than burnout.
Oh, that's a good quote.
Isn't that good? I was like, oh, that's the best way to sum that up, because I took pride in doing everything. And I think a lot of people do that. Anyone listening is probably, feeling that right now. And you might be thinking, it depends on your background, I guess. You probably feel like work should be hard and success should be hard, so I should just do everything. But you'll find that you're either going to burn out or you're going to work 90 hours a week, or you're just not going to enjoy it. And what's worse than owning your own business if you're not going to, enjoy waking up and love I know that's what you're all about. Yeah. So it really, I got to a point where custom contracting became really important for me. I was in the WordPress world, and I used a theme called Divi, which was a builder for WordPress. And I was getting a little more well-known in there. And I ended up finding a contractor who was awesome and started building websites I was essentially doing all the sales and project management. And then he eventually started building sites. I ended up giving him more roles. And then eventually I started scaling it a little bit more to the point to where I was just at the end of the agency, just focused on sales, getting projects started. I had a couple team members who would do all the project, all the fulfillment. And then I would swoop in at the end for the offboarding. That's kind of the approach that I took. And I should say, I did get to six figures, $100,000 as a solopreneur with very, very little additional help. Part of that was my maintenance plan. I had learned the power of recurring income. And I started a hosting and maintenance plan that became the bottom line for my business that grew month after month after month with new clients, which was awesome. It also brought a lot of people back to me for additional work. And then eventually I was raising my prices. That's how I got to six figures. I went from charging $1,000, $1,500 to like $4,000 and $5,000 being my averages. And it's kind of funny because looking back, I wanted to get to six figures when I got married and when life just became more serious and I became a business owner per se. And I was like, why am I not doing better? Like, why I'm working harder and harder, but I'm just not crossing like $50,000 or $60,000. But I was charging $1,000, $1,500 for projects.
Gosh.
And I'll tell you right now, it just seems so elementary and so simple. But if you charge $1,000 for a website, and you want to make $100,000 that year, if that's your only service, you need to sell 100 websites for that whole year. That is, unless you have a scalable system of templates or a team that can handle that, and then you're going to have to pay your team, you're not going to make $100,000. And it's really hard to do that many websites in 1 year. So you kind of have to put your pricing at a point or get your services to a point where you can charge $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on the, like average end to get to that six-figure range. And then if you build your recurring income and additional services, that can get you up to six figures before you know it. That's essentially how I did it.
Yeah. I also built my business to six figures a year when it was just me as a designer too, before I started doing templates and education. And I feel like I would give so much of that same advice, but from a different perspective, because maintenance plans is something I've never done and never considered because it is different that way. But I would love for you to talk about maintenance plans, like explain. Sure. Because I think a lot of designers listening right now are like that, ears perking up at that idea, but might not know what that could look like for them.
Yeah, it's actually why I built my first course, because I was so passionate about maintenance plans. I didn't think I was on to anything revolutionary. I felt like I was actually late to the game because I was 6 years into my journey before I started doing maintenance plans. And I was like, why didn't I do this sooner? And I had a mentor early on tell me, Josh, you should charge like $39 a month to update plugins for your clients. And I was like, who's going to pay that? They could do it themselves. Like with WordPress, it's a little bit different than Showit or some self-hosted platforms to where you are going to be a little more active in managing. So I was like, who's going to pay that? Well, come to find out, a lot of people will, especially business owners who should not be touching their websites and don't want to touch their website. They'll pay you $50 a month to update the website. And what I learned was with maintenance plans, to ideally wrap in the hosting as well on the WordPress side, at least, because when you become a web designer, you almost become a webmaster and you're going to get a call if they have a domain issue or a hosting issue. So you might as well charge for it. Like I'm sure everyone's had the situation where you get a call from somebody who can't remember their domain information or they're trying to set up an email or something. And you're probably doing free work you're not getting paid for. And I realized I need to like charge for this. And that's what I put in my maintenance plan. And then eventually I learned that it's really powerful to have a few different tiers of maintenance for your different types of clients. For example, your little pizza shop, local pizza shop is probably not going to need much maintenance. Maybe they need a new menu added every quarter or twice a year, new staff, whatever. They probably don't need too much ongoing work, but an e-commerce shop, that's a whole different ballgame. So they're going to need you in their corner every month. So I learned to have like higher tier maintenance and hosting as well. And I ended up creating at one point I was up to almost $5,000 a month just in recurring income on our hosting and maintenance. I did some of the advanced stuff, but my wife actually came into the business and just did the updating and reporting. And it was that simple. It really was. It was awesome. And then eventually when I started scaling my agency a little more, we were doing more advanced ongoing work and things that were a little outside of just maintenance and hosting. But I was able to turn over a lot of those tasks that were like junior type web design tasks. That freed me up to do more sales and focus on higher end projects. Then eventually I got into doing $10,000, $15,000 projects. And that's when we went to like multi six figures. So
That's awesome.
yeah, that's kind of the snapshot of the scaling journey, I guess.
Well, yeah, and that is, the maintenance plan. I mean, that is so smart. And you're even, so I would have a question with that of like, so for show it designers or Squarespace or Wix, these other platforms, the helping them host, helping them update plugins is not really going to be as much of a thing. But something like the person, your client coming back to you being like, I need help changing out my photo, or like, I am updating a menu, to use that example you did. That's all stuff those softwares could also charge for, that client you might be doing for free anyway, a little bit. Because it sometimes, if it's something you're like, oh, it's only going to take me like 15 minutes, you might just be like, sure, instead of like invoicing them for like $30 or whatever you feel like is worth the time. So how would, like, what do you think that would look like for someone if that was their situation where they're not doing that other stuff?
So it's interesting. I do have a lot of students now who have been through my maintenance plan course who don't use WordPress. Yeah. And the trick is you can call it a maintenance plan still if you wanted to, but a lot of people will call it like a care plan or optimization or whatever. There's a bunch of different terms you could come up with that basically keeps you in the client's corner every month. Because aside from in the WordPress world, we would update plugins and do those types of things. There's also just general website optimization, which would be speeding up the website. You could do SEO things in a maintenance plan potentially to where it's like basic. You could put alt text on images and some of the technical things that regardless of what platform you do, you need to ideally do that for better results. So there's a lot of different things that you could do with Show It, Squarespace, whatever, that would keep you in the corner of clients month to month. That can get into sometimes like higher end monthly services to where maybe you branch into like additional pages every month or helping with blog posts, content, copywriting and messaging. That's also a big one, but you could be adding more features. Potentially you could get into more like conversion based stuff. Like you could essentially month to month track the website traffic and look at conversions and look at how many people are signing up to their contact form or signing up for their email list or whatever. And then you could almost do this like every quarter. A lot of my students are doing like strategy type roles now to where they're helping their clients every month grow and then do different things on their website that will help attract clients. And there's a basic aspect of like maintenance, care, optimization, but then there's like growth strategies. Yeah. And I do want to say it's tricky because you don't want to blend the two much together because people will turn off and on copy help and SEO, but you don't want people to turn off and on your hosting and general care, like reporting and stuff like that. So that's where having like a lower tier type plan for that could work really well. I mean, even if it's $50 a month, if you get, 10 clients on that, that's $500 a month right there. Yeah. $500 a month ongoing keeps you top of mind with clients. Clients don't know this often. Some of them do, but they want to have their web person. And that's the beauty about, look, nowadays, there's so much emphasis on these like build yourself websites, do it yourself, dollar websites, whatever. But at the end of the day, a business owner does not want to do it themselves. They are starving for you. They're a web design person. And if you can be that person and you can be in their corner month after month, they will pay you to be in their corner month after month. And it's a great way to keep clients coming back and you can eventually build really good relationships with them. And then what I found and what a lot of my students are finding now is if you can get results for your clients, they will pay you more and they'll pay you over and over to do more work. So I could go on and on, but I love maintenance plans. Yeah. I love the recurring income aspect of it.
Yeah. And I totally get how that's so smart. It's a win for you and a win for the clients. I guess I feel like I could, like you said, you keep talking about, I could keep asking you questions. I mean, two kind of financial side questions of that. One would be for invoicing the clients. I would assume the best way to do this is not to send an invoice, but to set it on auto pay. Like, what did you do for that to like, because most of our softwares we're using invoice clients typically are not set up to be like a subscription model.
Yeah. So there's a lot of options now compared to when I did it in 2015 is when I got into basics of it. 2016 is when I officially like really went gung ho with my maintenance plan. But back then I actually used a WordPress plugin that connected with Stripe and it was just a button and people would just click the button and they would put their credit card info in and went through my Stripe account and that would automatically set them up for recurring billing. Stripe now has an automatic recurring billing feature. So There's a lot of different ways to go about it now. If you want to set it up like that, I always used a platform called 17 Hats for my invoicing. There's a bunch of different options now as well. But with that now, you can set up recurring billing. So you could send an invoice for the plan and then they could just pay it, and then would just take the credit card month after month. So luckily, there's a lot of options now for that, no matter what you're using.
All right, this quick message is for my fellow web designers listening to this episode. I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Josh. Isn't he awesome? I'm so glad we connected. Glad to be bringing you this interview. I wanted to pop in though to give you a free tool to help you book more clients in your web design business. So I created my freebie, The Designer's Guide to Mastering Discovery Calls, exactly for you to help you book more clients. So this PDF guide will walk you through how to not dread discovery calls with potential clients, how to feel confident because you know what to say and do, and it teaches you how to learn to book dream clients on these calls with some of my very best client booking tips. It's absolutely free. You can get the guide at elizabethmccravy.com/discovery. That's elizabethmccravy.com/discovery. I'm linking to it in the show notes as well. So go check that out, download it, apply it. It's a really great complement to what Josh and I are talking about in this episode. Now, back to the interview. Yeah, that's helpful. And with that as well, with your students right now who are doing this, what would you say the price range of maintenance plans you see people have? Like the lowest price someone's paying monthly to like the most someone might be paying?
Yeah, the very low end is generally like $39. That would be for just basic updates for, it's hard to do anything for under 30 or 40 bucks and stay profitable. Yeah. So that's the absolute lowest. I actually generally recommend starting at 49 just because most people who pay 39 are going to be fine with 49. Generally, the main ranges for the three average tiers would be like $50, and then either $99 or $149. And then the top tiers are usually $199 to even like $499, depending on what you're doing, if it's like an e-commerce shop or something like that. But again, that is kind of the foundation. On top of that is where you might do additional work with conversion, copy, advanced SEO, all those additional services that can be more ongoing that people could potentially scale up and scale down. But you never want people to turn their basic, care services off.
Yeah. No, I seriously love all that. I mean, that's, I think it's a great thing for designers listening to try. Okay. And talking back about like you scaling your business and you did hire some contractors to help. When you started doing that, I know I can relate to this from when I first started building a team, but like, it's so hard to give up the design work. And sometimes like myself, the first time I tried to do that with a subcontractor, it went horribly and I ended up redoing everything they did. And then it's like, you eventually learn. Now I have a designer on my team who I trust with like everything and she's incredible, but it takes time. So what would you say you have tips wise for like learning to delegate, learning to trust, finding the right people, all of that?
The hardest thing that I've found, and I've heard a lot of people who are probably similar to you and I, Elizabeth, with scaling, is to give up control, particularly when you're the one who does everything and you're the web guy or the web gal. Like your clients know you do the work. When you start to scale, you have to give up a little control. However, that doesn't mean that you need to immediately hand everything off to a junior designer. You can start small and just give them tasks. Like what I found that worked really well for me was I was not comfortable with them designing the whole site at first. My lead subcontractor, Jonathan, at the time, I met him through the Divi community and he found out that I was starting to scale and he sent me a really nice personal email saying he was new to web design, but he liked learning. He had an eye for design. He really did have a great eye for design. Eventually, he became way better than I did, but we started small. I gave him a couple small tasks and he figured it out, which is if you'd like to know the number one key for hiring somebody in web design, it's to see if they can just figure something out. And some things that's easier said than done. It's a blanket statement, but the skill of figuring things out is so important in web design and just being adaptable to all the different tools and strategies you might have. So he was able to do some of that. And then what I started doing was I would lay out the design for the homepage in the main pages and the main design elements. And then I would have him fill in everything else. So if I had like the main page, the header, the footer, and like one service page done, I might have him create the about us, the rest of the services pages off of that template, the contact, fill in content, get some stuff from the client. And then there we go. I was able to really tag team this with my contractor and get the whole website done. So I started slow, and then eventually I just gave him more and more control of the project as we moved forward. And then, like I mentioned, it got to the point where I would get the strategy going and the ideas and the visions of the website, and then turn it over to him eventually for even the initial design. Some of the later designs in my agency's portfolio, I didn't even design at all. It was completely him. So that was a process of about 2 years to get to that point. But yeah, you can start small, give a little bit of control. And then as soon as they do a really good job and you trust them, give them more control. I know it's tricky because you're going to pay more, like you're going to pay more out per build. But if you save time and you can free up yourself to run and grow your business and get better clients, you'll make so much more money quickly by doing what you want to do and not doing everything.
Yeah, that's great advice. And especially what you were saying of like giving people the chance to like figure it out themselves, because that's teaching them to have autonomy, which helps you not be the bottleneck of your business or of the project. If they feel like they can think through, like, not just like, let me ask Josh, but like, let me figure this out myself. With your business, so you sold your agency, right? Let's talk about that. Like, what did that look like? What does that even mean? Like, all the details on that experience.
Yeah, I should say, I think it's probably obvious now, I fumbled into business. I did not have like a 5-year plan and start my web design agency and say like, I'm going to do it myself, then scale and then sell it. I had no intention of selling my agency. When I started my business, my goal was to become a web designer and get a job at an agency. But because I was starting to make some money, I was like, if I did this myself and really made this a business, I could probably make 6 figures. And I did. But I did not have like a long-term goal or vision in mind. So I was just scaling the agency. I was just, running the business. But at the time when I started scaling, I had started teaching. And teaching just became such a passion project for me. It was a complete side hustle. We're recording this on the week of my 5-year anniversary of starting joshhall.co, my personal brand. I started it just because I was in online groups and I loved answering questions. And I just started posting tutorials about how to build websites with Divi and WordPress and helping people. It was completely 100% a side project, side hustle. I wasn't making any money from it. But because I was starting to scale my agency, I started to get a little more known with that content. And that's actually what attracted Jonathan, who became my lead designer. So I was essentially building this side hustle of joshhall.co while I was scaling my agency. And then when I started getting into courses and really taking that seriously, it quite frankly just took off on me. And luckily I had scaled it to the point where I really wasn't doing too much in the business at that point. I was just doing sales and getting projects started. But at one point, I wasn't spending any more than about 20 hours a week in my web design agency. And the rest of the time I was building courses and doing YouTube videos and stuff. And then eventually I got to the point where I came to this bottleneck where I was like, there's something called the 7-year itch in business. And I think a lot of people go through that. Yep. It was exactly 7 years. I had never even heard about that, but it was exactly 7 years that I was running the business. And I realized I'm actually starting to make more doing online courses, mainly because I scaled to the business to the point where I freed myself up to do the, joshhall.co. It's fair to say if I did not start this side hustle and my online teaching, I would have scaled In Transit Studios, my web design business. I would have scaled that to a whole nother level. I probably would have had my eyes on like a 7-figure agency type situation, but I was able to scale it to a point to support, me and my family while building this. So anyway, long story short, I got to the point where I realized I want to do courses and I cannot do all my courses and teach and coach and all the things I want to do and run my business. It's too much together. So I kind of had this decision where I was like, I could try to scale my agency and bring in people, but that's going to be so much work. I have so much like steam and momentum going with my courses. I just want to go for that. So what I actually ended up doing is one of my students who took his web design business to 6 figures in 1 year. I talked to him about it and he shared his plans of wanting to go, taking his business to the next level. And then he actually ended up purchasing my agency. Now I still retain essentially like a consultant role in the business. And it was not a sexy sell. It wasn't like I sold it for a huge amount and then I'm on a yacht the next week. That's not what happened. He didn't have much money or much capital, but I knew I wanted my clients to be well taken care of. I knew that I was at a point where I didn't burn out from the business by any means. I was just so much more interested in courses and teaching that my passion just drifted there. And luckily I was able to retain kind of a position in the company where I basically get paid every quarter as a consultant up to the amount that we agreed that I sold it for. And I basically get like an inside scoop of what they're doing, what's happening. I'm kind of like a coach to Eric, my CEO now, who runs that agency. And it worked out great. Like I'm really happy with how that worked out because I still am an agency founder. I still have a foot in the door with what's going on, what's maybe not working so well. And a lot of that relays directly to my students now, which is really cool. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. I feel like when you become an educator, you can quickly be fearful about being out of the industry.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've experienced that, but I definitely was afraid of that. But the fact that I have my foot in the door with the agency, I'm getting an inside look at what's going on. I'm just not doing, client facing stuff or actually building sites anymore.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's super exciting. I'm sure, like, even though you're right, like it might not be like super glamorous on a yacht after, but it is like a cool thing to be able to build a business you can sell. And I feel like so often in our industry and in the online space in general, that's not like a thing that's talked about because so often it's a personal brand, which both of us have personal brands now. And that's hard to sell. But something like a website design agency is sellable.
I will say too, real quick on the sellable note, the most valuable thing in my business at that point was my maintenance plan. Okay. So had I not had that recurring income, I don't even know if I could have sold it. Essentially, what I would have been selling was like a list of contacts and a list of previous clients. So, and that's not terribly valuable unless they're like buying repeatedly or ready to buy again. So it's just something to bear in mind. If you are interested in selling your business, you really do have to make it a point to build recurring income and make sure it is something that has like cash flow coming in. Because otherwise you're kind of just selling a job and no one's going to want to buy a job.
Yeah, because you're right. Otherwise it's like your leads or random people you've worked with. Because then in that case, if it's just like past client list, in a sense, you're just referring. You could just refer them to someone else.
A lot of my clients at that point were in need of website redesigns. And since I sold the agency 2 years ago, they have redesigned a lot of my best clients' sites. But yeah, by far, the thing that was most valuable was my recurring income with my maintenance plan.
Yeah, I love that. And that's, a cool story. And it's cool that you still get to be involved in it. Okay, let's talk about your Josh Hall brand. I've heard you talk about this some of like how you built it on not that much time as you're building it, working in your agency. What was that like what was that like transitioning to being an educator, basically, from your perspective versus working with clients?
It was very different. I mean, it's a completely different skill set for selling, and building a personal brand online is very different than networking in person and being a service provider. Honestly, I think it's way easier to build a web design business to six figures than any sort of influence. Would you agree with that? Do you feel like it's easier to build a website business or a personal brand online?
Gosh, I would say it's hard for me to know because I feel like I had the website business backing building a personal brand. Yeah. I mean, if someone's out there just like, hey, I'm just going to like from nothing build courses, then 100% it's way easier to do a service first.
Yeah, that's what I found. Now, that said, I love what I do, and it's been the most fulfilling and rewarding stuff. And there's something so nice about controlling everything and not having to rely on a client to get back with you or send you content, which is, of course, the Achilles heel for every web designer. Yeah. It was really nice to get out of that. It is a very different form of selling and offers and things like that. So it was very different, but I think the time constraints actually were probably the best thing for me. And the reason being is kind of interesting. When I sold my agency, I thought the next week that I came into joshhall.co with full time, I generally don't work more than 30 to 35 hours a week. So I was like, 30, 35 hours to this, I could do so much, but I felt overwhelmed. I thought I was going to feel free as a bird and it was going to be, just like everything I dreamed of. Part of me was like, why am I not happier that this is where I'm at? Because I should feel like that, but I felt so overwhelmed with everything that I want to do now and could do. Those time constraints early on actually really helped me. I hope that's beneficial to folks doing things on the side, because sometimes if you're building your web design business as a side hustle, that's actually a benefit that you may not realize, because you have a certain amount of time You got to get stuff done, and you will get it done in a certain amount of time. Whereas if you give yourself all the time in the world, you're going to stretch things out to never get them done, basically, or they can, again, kind of feel overwhelming. So yeah, in a weird way, I had to kind of embrace that mindset and kind of be my own boss and create more disciplines around like what I want to do, what I want to get done, when I want to get it done. I had to learn that I had to set my own deadlines. Typically, the deadlines would be based off of client work. Like my client would say, I want this site done by the end of August. So there's our deadlines. We'll figure everything out from there. With this, it's like, okay, I could create a course. When do I want it to come out? If I don't set a deadline, it's never going to come out. It's just going to keep on working on it. So there were a lot of things like that I had to learn that helped me as I transitioned from service provider to course creator and content creator.
Yeah, that's so true that with stuff like courses, it's like you truly have to come up with an arbitrary date, so to speak, that something's going to be done by, because there's no, unless you've like beta launched it and told people like, here's the date. It's like, yeah, you are completely having to decide that yourself. And it is different.
Yeah, that actually helped me. My first few courses, I did like a pre-launch and I said, the course is coming out, in a month. So I had to get that course done in a month. So that really helped me because it's weird. And it kind of sucks because you would think in a freedom-based business like we have, in a control-based business, I would call it, it feels like I just want to wake up and do my content and do what I'm passionate about, what I'm feeling. But you have to almost be more strict on deadlines and scheduling and time management. I know you've covered a lot of that in your podcast so far because you got to get stuff done. That's I think the trap that a lot of, I don't know if I'd call them influencers or coaches and people like that fall into, is if you don't have a deadline, you're just not going to get something done. You've got to be your own boss in a way and almost need to be more disciplined and strict on yourself sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally agree. And with the how you said you did pre-sell your first course, what was that like? Like, how did that go? And how did you already have students ready to buy from you at that time?
Yeah. So I mentioned my first course was my maintenance plan course because as you could probably tell a little bit ago, like that, I am so passionate about recurring income and maintenance plans. Side note, recurring income and maintenance plans is actually what got my family through a 56-day NICU experience. So my daughter was born and we were in the newborn intensive care unit for 56 days, completely unexpected. Thank God I had our maintenance plan that covered our bills at that time because it was really stressful and really trying. Also, thank goodness I was already scaling my agency at that point because I wasn't doing all the work. So that led me to create my first course on maintenance plans. And that course is still out today. I have the newer version up of it. But I did that first course as kind of a trial just to see if I would enjoy it. Because at that point I had been putting out tutorials, but I didn't really know where I wanted to take my business. I didn't know if I wanted to do layouts and templates or whether I wanted to be a plugin creator for WordPress. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but I really enjoyed teaching. So I was like, let me just try a course. I'll just share my maintenance plan. I literally shared everything about my maintenance plan, all my processes, like back and forth on selling maintenance plans and how I closed them, a lot of like real world stuff. And that's what I launched my first course on. And it was a game changer. Like I think I brought in it was like 82 students in the first round because I had already had people who were subscribed to me on YouTube and in my email list. Prior to that, I really wasn't selling anything to them. So this was like the first offer. And then I think I made like $8,000 or $9,000 on that first launch. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. This is like, what have I kept on doing this? And what have I kept on selling this? That started the like train of course creation for me. I just went wild on creating courses while I was scaling my agency and had the time to do that. So that's how it all started.
Yeah. And that's so exciting. Like when you get those first course sales, I know that feeling. It's really cool. And with your business now, you have so many courses and you also have a membership. Any tips for managing all the offers and like, how do you do that? Cause it is like, just so many, it feels like I look at your business like so many moving pieces between all the things. Yeah,
it's actually a problem for me now that I'm in the middle. It's funny. We're having this conversation like right as I'm in the middle of reworking all my offers. Exactly from what you said, there's like so much of it. So I've got a lot of one-time courses right now. My course is essentially up to this point, and I should say I have no regrets about what I've created up to this point, but I am at a point right now where I'm pivoting slightly to like a little bit higher ticket, higher tier programs that are a little more confined as far as like my offers. Cause yeah, right now I actually have 10 courses that range from helping people learn web design, like design, SEO, CSS, Divi, all the way to the business side of things with my maintenance plan course. And I have a business course, which is kind of my main thing. So there's a lot of different moving pieces, and I have them bundled up in a bundle option to where a lot of my like prime example students have gone through all the courses. They learn web design, they start getting clients, they build their business, build their recurring income. And a lot of them are in multi six figures now. So it's like amazing. But what I have realized is I'm really at a point where, I mean, I guess I'm 5 years into it now. So now I'm already kind of refining who I'm serving. Now the next evolution of my business is really focusing on the business side of things. So I'm actually getting out of teaching web design as much as I am teaching web design business. That's what I found my real talent is. And that's kind of what's going to help me kind of really take a lot of my courses that I have now and just kind of move them together and package them up differently. So that's what's kind of cool is, yeah, right now there's a lot of different moving parts to it, but I feel good in the fact that, and this is for anyone who has a lot of different services, you can package them up together and you can bundle things and make like one big product out of a lot of little products. That's what I've been exposed to now with my stuff. And I'm like, wow, okay. Now I'm at a point where I've got all these different resources. Now it's time to like package and put them together, and probably going to be a much higher price tag with them all together. But that's kind of where the things are headed.
That's cool. And that's exciting. And yeah, it makes sense too, as you've built that many of like having to rework things sometimes. And with your membership, like that's so fascinating to me as well. How do you feel like that fits in time wise in terms of like, you said you work like 30 to 35 hours a week. Like how much would you say you're spending on like all the different pieces of your business at this point?
Yeah. So for reference, for anyone who's not familiar with my setup, I have these courses that you can purchase one off or together in a bundle. Those are like do-it-yourself courses. You do get access to monthly calls with me for a Q&A, but apart from that, you go through the course at your own pace, and I have a support center for all my students. My membership is actually cleverly named by the folks from Circle, which is where I host my membership. It's an online membership platform. They called my club, it's called the Web Design Club, but they called it a coaching community. And that so perfectly nailed what I set up with this. It's a mix of community of like-minded web designers who are serious, who are running their business and helping each other grow and scale. But there's also a coaching aspect because we have weekly calls. With me, we do monthly trainings, and then that's the only place where people can message me anytime and I coach them. So they can ask me any questions they have. Could be business related, tech related, anything like that, scaling, hiring related. That's where I do some coaching. It's actually really nice. Right now, it actually only takes, I'd say less than 10 hours a week on average for me between doing a weekly call. And a lot of it is getting in there every day. Generally, I get in there for at least a half an hour up to an hour at some point to do the coaching, which I just do via messaging and Circle. And then the rest of it, honestly, it's my favorite place to hang out. So it's kind of like having people paying for this, top-notch community where I love hanging out. And I'm also getting to know like a lot of my top tier students in there. So it's been really cool. It's been one of my favorite things that I've been able to offer so far. It's not huge. I have under 100 members, but there are 100 serious people who are really into it and really serious about growing their business. So yeah, it's been really cool. And that's where that came to play for me is when I was selling courses, I realized, number one, I'm not doing any recurring income, which I was so used to with my maintenance plan. And the bigger problem was I wouldn't hear from any students unless I asked for a testimonial. But somebody could go through my business course, get amazing results. And unless they happen to reach out to me and just let me know, or unless I reached out to them to give a testimonial, I have no idea what results they had, how it went, if they finished the course, So I learned that by having a membership option, it gave me the ability to have deeper relationships with my customers and my students. That is a really valuable business lesson I learned. When you're selling an online product, if you can back it up with some sort of subscription, whether it's included or separate, you'll get a lot more deeper relationships and you'll get a feel for the results that you're getting, with your stuff. So that's kind of where that all came into play for me.
Yeah, that's exciting. It sounds awesome. And yeah, I just recently started my own membership that's not just for website designers, but for really taking in people to listen to my podcast.
Mm.
But it's such a different, for me, it's felt like, oh my gosh, this is so different than courses and website templates, which is what I'm so used to, but it's been really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay. I feel like I've asked you all the questions and we've been talking forever. And I'm actually, guys, you're going to be able to hear me on Josh's show as well. We're recording that next to some back-to-back question stuff here, but I have a few rapid fire questions to close out. And then I want you to tell everyone where they can connect with you. And I've loved hearing your story. So, okay. I like asking this question lately to people, but what's an unpopular opinion you have about, you can do both or one, but either about websites and website design or web design business. So either the business side or websites in general.
Okay. I got to give you two. Give you two since you're asking. So on the website side itself, there are so many people who are obsessed with speed, and speed is important. However, my site does not load very quick and I have no issues. I never have any, knock on wood, unless I did have my server was down briefly just because they were doing upgrades and updates. But other than that, I have never had an issue that a lot of people tend to have when they get wild with speed, because a lot of people will add different CDNs or Cloudflares and all these optimization plugins, and then they have conflicting with each other often, and it can be a really big problem. Now, I'm not against those things, and I do recommend the basics of speed, but I would say so many people are going to say your website's slow, you need to speed it up. Yes, but don't let speed overshadow usability. One of my close colleagues, they have an agency in Nebraska. Their site is super slow, but all their clients are in Nebraska. So people around the world don't really need to connect. I mean, they're looking at their website. It might load a little bit slower in the UK, but their clients aren't really in the UK. So the site loads way faster for their local area, and it's not that big of a deal. They convert very high with a very slow site. So that's what I would say. Speed is it's one of those things where, I would do what you can, but don't let that overshadow a really well laid out, usable site that is conversion based, particularly when it comes to adding video or elements that will really help it convert. The business side of things, I've learned this the hard way. And I think most people in the business world just harp on productivity. You want to be productive. You want to get the most out of your hours, go, productive. Particularly if anyone coming out of a corporate job, you're probably used to being a machine and getting as much as you can done in a certain amount of time. But what I found is way more important in the online entrepreneurial world than productivity is priority. So what you're working towards is way more important than actually what you're working on potentially. So this is where I've learned thinking about your business, looking at strategy, looking at what you really want to do over the next few months, what you want your days to look like. That will help you prioritize all your offers, everything you're doing in your business, and then you can be productive in the time you allow. But don't just work and be productive for the sake of working because you feel like you should be working. You might actually end up doing something that's really costly in the long run. Practical example, when I was scaling my agency, if I had just kept on working on all the business cards and the design work and then keeping my websites lower cost and just kept on working and working, which I did for years, that's why I scaled to 6 figures a lot slower than a lot of my students, because I didn't really sit back and think and prioritize my best services and what I wanted to get out of my business. So I ended up taking way longer to have a sustainable business. So priority, way more important than productivity in my experience, at least.
Yeah, I agree. Because you can be super productive, but it's on the wrong thing. Who cares? You're not actually moving anything forward. Yeah, that's a great tip. Okay, so you are a parent who works from home with number 3 on the way, which is exciting. And so you've done this for a while. And I know a lot of listeners are also parents or maybe want to be parents. So what's a tip you have for working from home with your kids possibly in the house and all of that?
Oh man, we're going to have to do another episode on this because I love chatting about this. It's not easy. It's a struggle. You experience that. You have a really young, not even one at this point,
about
right?
to be. Yeah, we'll be one. Yeah, right. About to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually think the toddler age is way harder than the baby. Well, it may be different for mothers with, nursing and all the roles that you have directly with the newborn. So that's probably not fair to say for me as a dad. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, so she's able to take care of the kiddos primarily, but I am very active with my babies. Just before this, we went to Chick-fil-A and I hustled back. They were having kind of a whiny day, and I got them out of the house to give my wife a break and came back and ate real quick before I jumped on this call. So there are things like that to where I would just say plan for the days not to be perfect. Like have your scheduled times where you have a call, you have a deep work segment, have things you want to get done, but it's very rare if you work from home that you're going to work like 8 hours straight. There's going to be interruptions. There's going to be little things here or there working from home. And I don't know, it sounds like you have a similar mindset with how you structure your day and time management to where it's kind of it's not work-life balance as much as it is work-life integration. Like you might do a work segment and then you might have a little one, then you might do another work segment. It's just the way it's going to be generally working from home, depending on your spouse's situation or whatever. So that's the big thing is just, I would say like embrace the chaos. Don't expect things to be absolutely perfect. There have been times where if you listen to my podcast, especially the earlier episodes, you will hear my daughters in the background going a little wild. It's just, it was a part of it. They're outside the door. I have an office right now that's like in a different part of the house now with our new home, but they still hit the side of my door sometimes. So it's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, I could go into loads of tips, but I honestly, I think just right now, embracing, the chaos and just expecting it not to be absolutely perfect. It's really important. Otherwise, you're going to feel like this is just impossible, or you're going to feel overwhelmed, but it's just what it is. And luckily, after COVID, everyone's used to people working from home. So it's a lot more common now than it was.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I feel like I struggled with that so much when I first started working after my maternity leave, just like I was used to like planning it out so perfectly and I could do whatever I planned. And now it is like, a lot different. And it's cool that you get to like be around your kids while you're working, because not a lot of dads don't get that opportunity, like even slightly. So I think it's cool that you and your wife are both like around.
Yeah, that's one of the big benefits of web design is you can 100% work near or around your kids and be involved as much as you want. And you can align your projects and your deadlines and your day. Like you could work 4 days a week if you wanted to and just get a lot done in the segments you have for work. And it kind of goes back to what I learned when I started doing tutorials on the side. You'll have less time as a parent, but there's this like parent effect that is real where you'll end up making a lot more money with less time when you're a parent because you've got a short window.
Yes.
It's amazing what you'll get done in a short window.
That's right? So true. I was literally telling someone on a podcast yesterday, I don't know what I was doing when I wasn't a mom. Like I was working, I had so much more time. Like, what was I doing? Like, I don't know, just sitting around calling it work is kind of how it feels sometimes.
I think every parent I've talked to has said that. They're like, what the hell was I doing when I had like 8 hours in a full day? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. What's an impactful business book you've read that would be helpful to listeners?
So I'm actually reading it right now. I mentioned it earlier on. It's called Free Time. The author is Jenny Blake. I had her on my podcast recently. If anyone listens to my show, the Web Design Business Podcast, it was episode 195. I think it would probably really coincide with particularly parent entrepreneurs when it comes to like balancing what you should do and shouldn't do. But that book has already really helped me. I mean, it goes back to that quote I said earlier. I think I said it right. There's no reward for wearing all the hats in your business except burnout. Like that really helped me realize like, okay, even right now, I'm doing a lot of things that I shouldn't be doing. If I'm going to get to the next level for what I envision in my business, I've got to even give up a little more control and dish that out. So Free Time by Jenny Blake. It's what I'm currently reading right now. I highly recommend it. It's a really, really good read. And this is an entrepreneur who spends barely any time on social media, which is also really interesting. Yeah,
that's so big right now. I feel like people are talking about that a lot of like, how can we be off Instagram and all of that as business owners more? Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to check that out and check out your episode about that. Okay. Tell everyone though, where they can connect with you and find you and your podcasts and all the things.
Awesome. Yeah. So my podcast is the Web Design Business Podcast. You can check that out wherever you listen to podcasts. And then if anyone's interested, you can go to my website. It's joshhall.co. All my resources are there. I've got some free resources that'll help you get started with web design or take your business to the next level. And then of course my courses are there. all pretty easily found, hopefully. So just go to joshhall.co. But I think the bigger thing is to check out my podcast, the Web Design Business Podcast. I just love podcasting. I think it attracts such a more like-minded and serious person about business who is, like thoughtful and really intentional, which is different than YouTube and some of the other platforms. So if you're listening to this, go check out the podcast. I'd love to help you out even more in your web design business.
Yes. Awesome. Yes. Everyone check out Josh, and thank you for coming on. Thank you for this longer conversation too. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Same here. Well, I'm excited to have you on my show.
Yes.
So everyone definitely look out for Elizabeth on my show.
Yes. Awesome. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast today and for staying until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my online course and coaching program for designers, Booked Out Designer. In this program, I teach you how to build a successful, in-demand, booked out business as a designer. You'll learn everything from the exact experience I take my clients through to things like figuring out your niche, mastering discovery calls, pricing your services for profit, creating contracts that will not cause you legal troubles, and my exact social media strategies to book clients. You even get to watch recordings of me in actual meetings with my actual clients so you can really learn through what you're seeing. We take things you're learning on this podcast and so many topics I never even cover on this show and deep dive into them. So in addition to the amazing course, the course is 9 modules of teaching with over 90 lessons. You get group coaching calls with me and access to an exclusive Facebook community of designers just like you. And fun fact, this isn't one of those kind of Facebook groups where the founder never comments on posts or you never see them in there. You'll find me there all the time, ready to help you out with any business question you have. So to get info on the course and to see when the doors will be opening again, head to elizabethmccravey.com/BOD, short for Booked Out Designer. I hope to be able to coach you and teach you inside of the course soon. And don't forget that you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. And a great way to support the show is to leave a rating and review, share it with a friend, share it on social media. All of that will help get the word out. All right, I'll see you again next week.